President Trump has repeatedly teased seeking a third term. The possibility, and whether it even is a possibility, has been a subject of much debate. A poll released earlier this year from Newsweek found that half of President Trump's supporters believe he is eligible to seek a third term. Joining us now to discuss this topic is our chief political correspondent. What are your sources at the White House telling you about a potential third term for President Trump?
My sources are all adamant that, despite claims to the contrary by others, President Trump is not joking when he says he is considering a third term, but also that he is fully sincere when he says it's a shame he can't run for a third term. I'm told that in multiple private conversations, President Trump has emphasized that he hasn't made up his mind yet, but that serving a third term is something he is definitely open to, even though it's just too bad that he can't, because lots of people really want him to.
This despite the fact that President Trump is, as a matter of law, ineligible to seek a third term due to constitutionally mandated term limits which have been in place for nearly 3/4 of a century.
That is one fact, but as you just pointed out, according to polling, half of President Trump's supporters reject that fact in favor of the more welcome alternative fact that, actually, President Trump can seek a third term. So there's clearly a lot of disagreement regarding the possibility or lack of a possibility. Whichever one it is, no one really knows.
The suggestion that Trump could even theoretically seek a third term would seem to be incompatible with a conventional reading of the Constitution. What have your sources said as far as what strategies are being considered to get around that limitation?
As we all know, President Trump is anything but conventional. Multiple plans are currently under consideration for how to circumvent the limitations imposed by the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. The focus of all of these plans is on the loophole created, some say, by the usage in the amendment of the word elected. It says no one may be elected to more than 2 terms as president, not that no one can serve more than 2 terms. So, one plan is to have President Trump run to be the vice president of another Republican candidate, then, assuming they win the election, have the new president resign, at which point Trump, as the vice president, would succeed to the office.
Very clever.
Indeed. There is also a similar plan that involves the House of Representatives electing President Trump to be the Speaker of the House. As you know, while the Speaker is traditionally a sitting member of the House, there is nothing in the Constitution or the bylaws of the chamber that requires the Speaker to be a member. So Trump could be elected Speaker of the House. Then the new president and vice president could both resign, which would leave Speaker Trump as next up in the line of succession to once again take office as the president.
Fiendish and devious, though that one sounds a bit overcomplicated. And it depends on the Republicans not merely winning another presidential election, but also maintaining their majority in the House.
True, the requirement to win popular elections will always represent a flaw in any long-term plans of the Republican Party, at least for now. But again, this is only one hypothetical scenario that has been considered.
Are there any members of the Trump White House concerned about how such an attempt to secure a third term might escalate the opposition they receive from the Democrats? If it becomes known that President Trump intends to serve a third term by running for vice president or Speaker of the House, couldn't a term-limited former Democrat, Barack Obama, for instance, pursue the same strategy?
Yes, but that would be copying.
For another thing, wouldn't such plans, even if deemed constitutional, suggest a naked attempt on the part of President Trump to hold on to power in defiance of the clear intent of the law and turn off some of his supporters?
Well, that sort of thing hasn't seemed to bother Trump supporters so far. Besides, there are many other potential plans without those possible pitfalls you mentioned. For example, President Trump could leave office at the end of his term, then challenge the new president to a golf game with the presidency on the line.
That's a good strategy. He's an excellent golfer.
He's the best golfer in the whole wide world, and that's just an objective fact. Other outside-the-box strategies that have been discussed include President Trump signing an executive order declaring that he gets to stay the president, President Trump locking himself in the White House's newly renovated Lincoln bathroom and refusing to come out after his current term expires, or just doing what he did last time and having Elon Musk buy the presidency for him, only without the election this time. It's also been suggested behind closed doors that President Trump could run for re-election in disguise. perhaps under an assumed identity, perhaps simply as an anonymous masked candidate of some kind. That way, his legal name would not appear on the ballots, voters would not be casting votes for Donald Trump, so he technically wouldn't be elected to a third term, but rather his alter ego would be elected to a first term.
Would Trump then have to maintain that alter ego for the entirety of his term?
Perhaps, and that would presumably result in several years of highly amusing farcical hijinks, but it's far more likely he would carry on the pretense until he'd been officially sworn in for a new term, then dramatically reveal his true identity, Masked Singer style.
Or like at the end of an episode of Scooby-Doo.
Sure, if that's your frame of reference. At that point, he would simply carry on as president under the assumption that nobody would actually try and stop him, which, again, has been a successful strategy for him up to now. In fact, that strategy is the key to the simplest of the plans for Trump to gain a third term currently being discussed. He could merely run for a third term as though he is allowed to, get elected, and remain in office.
But would that be legal?
I don't understand the question.
What, if anything, has President Trump or his team said in response to the accusations that by even entertaining the possibility of a third term, Trump is behaving as a lawless authoritarian, a dictator who seeks only power and personal enrichment and cares nothing for the law or the good of the nation?
No.
No?
No, that's not it. When I've asked my sources for reasons why President Trump might want to extend his presidency beyond his current term, they've answered with things like President Trump wanting to have more time to enjoy his new ballroom, which is currently under construction, or wanting to be able to personally supervise the building of additional monuments throughout Washington, D.C. to go along with the triumphal arch he's currently planning to erect to commemorate the nation's 250th anniversary, or to finally realize his longtime dream of burning the Library of Congress and National Archives to the ground. But no one has ever said it's because the president is a dictator or a fascist.
I didn't say fascist.
Neither did they. Neither did I.
Are there concerns about President Trump's age? Were he to somehow secure a third term in 2029, when that term began, he would be 82 years old.
So? How old was Biden when he was elected? Like 95?
78.
Practically a mummy.
The same age President Trump is right now.
It's not as old as it used to be.
Have you heard any talk among senior Republicans about who might be Trump's heir apparent if he opts not to attempt to subvert the Constitution and seek a third term?
Of course, the subject has been discussed, though usually not in the presence of the president himself. There are a few possible successors currently serving in the administration. Secretary of State Rubio, Homeland Security Secretary Noem.
J.D. Vance.
No.
He is the current vice president.
Just no!
Very well. Thanks for the insight. We'll check back in later, perhaps after you've had a snack when you aren't feeling quite so snappish. Up next, speaking of snacks, as the government shutdown drags on and low-income Americans continue to worry about rising health care premiums and dwindling funding for supplemental nutrition benefits, many struggling families are asking the same question. What's the safest and tastiest way to eat roadkill? We'll have some tips as well as demonstrations of a few mouth-watering recipes from our special in-studio guest, author of the upcoming cookbook, Critters Make Good Vittles, and United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's after the break.